places. And, we're still getting more and more CO2. See any big dips? What's this big dip? What happened here? There's a little tiny dip.
Oh, yeah.
What was that about? What happened?
Financial crisis.
Yeah, financial crisis. So even a massive financial crisis only made a tiny, tiny difference in our CO2. It'll be interesting to see maybe what happens with COVID. I think probably a similar sort of thing. It doesn't drop by as much as we want. So I've got this one, the COP21 France. What happened there? Anybody know?
Paris Agreement.
Paris Agreement, right? What was the Paris Agreement about?
Engagement between nations to decrease their CO2 emissions to pre-industrial level.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. To pre-industrial level, and, oops, yeah, a few things actually. It was this one here. It was about the, limit the warming to less than 2%, right? And achieve net zero by mid-century. It also talked about to enhance resilience and adaptation to climate impacts, and also these align financial flows in the world with these objectives. That's really interesting, financial flows. That's going to be fun to see. But then as part of this, as it's grown again, is to fund some less able countries to afford these things as well. But financial flows, so big business, big corporations, governments, everything has to align with this. So that's a real headache. We also, every 2 years, everyone has to take a global stock take to see how they're doing with the goals of the Paris Agreement. It says 5 years, but I read recently it's every 2 years. So, so this is all happening. So there's a lot of information that's going in, understanding how we're doing. Again, it's a huge, huge issue, right? We don't just say, oh, let's reduce, CO2 by 1.5% and just expect it's going to happen. It takes a very long time for organizations, companies, countries, lifestyles, everything to start to change and how we measure that. And then put that back into the feedback loop. This is the most recent ratings, just for a few people, September 2021. Who we got? Ooh, a few people, very insufficient, right? This isn't everybody, of course. Iran, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Singapore. What's happening in Singapore? Oh, we're so good. Thailand. What's happening in Thailand? I think I know. I imagine it's around deforestation in Thailand. That's a real issue. Highly insufficient. Well, that's kind of most people, it seems. Argentina, Australia, blah, 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 everyone else. Only insufficient. A few big. It's interesting because you do have a few big economies, and that's actually where a lot of emissions changes is happening. Also, with certainly European countries have started to really regulate around electric vehicles, things like that, around the production of that. Even in California recently, which mandates, I think it's 5% of all cars sold are going to be electric vehicles. California has decided they're going to be 100% renewable in the next 20 years or less. And they can measure already the decline in emissions in California. So it's making a very noticeable change. Certainly in some states, but still inefficient, almost inefficient. That's pretty good. Costa Rica's good. What does Costa Rica do? What's so good about Costa Rica? Besides coffee. You just need coffee. What's so good about Costa Rica?
Like quite completely care about biodiversity and forest space, like there are green areas.
Green areas, lots of places have green areas. What else? The renewable energy is huge, 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 right? In Costa Rica. And so some other places as well. I'm surprised about the UK, but that's interesting. But who's at the Gambia? Wow. Okay. So they're going to be compatible. What's in the Gambia? Because I don't actually know. What would it be, do you think? I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But I would imagine perhaps, probably not highly industrialized maybe, and Probably maybe a lot of green space, not sure. Anyway, so you can see though, unfortunately, a lot of countries, insufficient, highly insufficient, critically insufficient. So that's a little bit of a problem. However, just another way of looking at it. Some countries, yeah, are really bad. And so that's just a way of putting it. Really who's on target, who's not on target, how their projection is. And some countries getting worse, you know. I mean, Canada pulled out of the agreement because they were doing so badly. They just decided not even to bother. But unfortunately, their projection's a little higher. Some other countries that were doing well, a little bit worse. So yeah, another way to look at it. What do you think? Just some pretty pictures. And so this one here really talks about the temperature check. Also, really aligning this, which we need to think about. Everyone, including investors, can support sustainable initiatives to help avoid these consequences. In Australia, we see that a lot. I have a very good friend who is still in the process of getting a job for Rio Tinto. And Rio Tinto, you know, huge commodities organization. But one of their goals and what she's working on is they're transitioning all of their sort of plant and material to green energy so that they have zero emissions. And that's, so you can see even large companies like that are trying to do that. And that's it. Who has the most CO2? Quite a long way. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. That's just whoops, I'm gonna fall down and crack my head. Yeah, so that's just big, obviously smaller, we've got Oceania, obviously. But then per capita, the picture changes a little bit. Right, some kind of United States, huge per capita, Australia, places like that. Then we see all this. Our emissions change, land use change. Okay, so we're still fossil fuels are still pretty big, right? Still using more, just another way. How we look at carbon, we use it for heating, electricity, transport, manufacturing, agriculture, buildings, industry, things like that. So that's where we use a lot of it. Electricity. By 2025, that's 2 years' time. Asia is going to have half. It's half of the world's electricity. Right? So we need to think about that. And this is what I was talking about. The other side. So California had mandated that a certain percentage of cars needed to be EVs, and now they can see actual improvements, not just in public health, but in public health because of air quality. You'll see a lot of interesting things, certainly within a lot of European manufacturers, BMW and the like. They will stop making petrol-fueled cars by, I think, 2035. So afterwards, you're not even going to buy something that isn't electric. Now, countries like Australia don't make their own cars, so everyone's going to have to buy one eventually. That will be interesting, but it's still going to take a long time for some of those effects to work through. Batteries. Who makes the most batteries? China. Right? And look at the growth. That's just 2022, 2027. That's massive, and even more. Well, actually, they've gone from 77% to 69%, so it's slightly less projected, but the growth in batteries is going to be huge. We also see things like this in geopolitics. Some places have the materials we need to make batteries. And this is in Bolivia, right? They have a lot of lithium. So now we have a few Chinese companies who moved into that. So you'll see a little bit of geopolitics around renewable energy. It's kind of ironic in a way, isn't it? Right? You get the world better, less climate change, but let's fight over the materials. What about animals? Cows contribute a fair bit to global warming as well. They emit a lot of methane. There's a lot of science going into reducing methane in cows. So that'll be interesting. And again, consumption of meat is growing. That's 2011, be a lot higher now, of course. So animals contribute a lot. Now we also know that lab-grown meat is going to be a new thing. It's going to be a big thing. We've already got the things like Beyond Burgers, Impossible Burgers, etc. You know, it's not sort of second generation stuff perhaps. But now we're actually growing meat from cells of animals. And this is going to continue to grow. Has anybody ever eaten this? Singapore is the only place we've got some chicken that you can eat from lab grown. Might as well try it. But anyway, we'll see. But we see meat production. We know meat's a huge climate change issue, but we have more and more meat production as well. The good news is based on A.T. Kearney, they're one of the largest consultancy groups in the world. They've sort of forecasted what they think the future of meat consumption might look like, and they see this kind of, they call it cultured meat, is going to increase by quite a bit, non-vegan meat replacements, and then conventional meat will only take up about 40% by 2040 is what they're thinking. So a lot less dead animals, a lot fewer dead animals, but also if you're an investor, this is where to invest. And if you own cattle, that could be a problem. But we'll see with climate change how that accelerates or not. But people need to try it first. Not everybody's interested. I don't see that issue. Well, we also might